So now we'll see the various actions produced by acetylcholine when you consume it. Okay. But as such, acetylcholine is not used clinically because of a few reasons behind that. And the reason why we are not using acetylcholine is, first of all, because it has got a very short half life. Means as soon as you consume acetylcholine, it will, it will last for few seconds to few minutes, that's it, and it will be metabolized very very quickly. The reason behind its quick metabolism is, yes, you people know the reason, the presence of the enzyme acetylcholine esterase. Okay, so acetylcholine esterase will rapidly break this acetylcholine into acetate and choline. Okay, apart from acetylcholine esterase, one more enzyme is there who is a friend of acetylcholine esterase, and he'll do the same thing, but there is a difference in the location, that is butyrylcholinesterase. So this butyrylcholinesterase is present in plasma. Acetylcholinesterase is present near your neuron, or you can say your cholinergic neuron. Okay, so the main function, the main role of both these acetylcholinesterase or butyrylcholinesterase is one and the same, that is they will break the acetylcholine. Okay, we'll see the structure of acetylcholine, and then we'll see where exactly these choline esterases enzymes will break the molecule of acetylcholine. The structure of acetylcholine goes somewhat like this. We have got an acetate group and a choline group. Okay, so this comes your acetate group, and here is your choline. Okay, so this is acetate group and this one is your choline group, and it is in this area where your acetylcholine esterase or your butyrylcholine esterase will act and will break acetylcholine molecule into acetate and choline. Okay, I'll write the name acetylcholine. Okay, so this is the structure of acetylcholine. There is an acetate group and there is a choline group. Okay, and because this area has been exposed to acetylcholinesterase as well as to butyrylcholinesterase, so they can be easily acted upon by these enzymes, and they split up and they get metabolized. Okay, apart from this, you can see over here about the N molecule, there is a plus mark, there is charges. Okay, this is quaternary ammonium, and quaternary ammonium molecule have got charges on it. Whenever any substance have got charges, what will be its action on the transportation across the biological membrane? Can charged molecule easily cross the biological membrane, or uncharged molecule easily cross the biological membrane? Yes. Yes, charged molecule means they have got low lipophilicity. That means they are unable to cross the biological membrane. Okay, so the second reason why we are not using acetylcholine as clinically, because they are less lipophilic. So they cannot cross the important biological barriers, most importantly your blood brain barrier. Okay, apart from this, the very last and the most important reason why we cannot use acetylcholine clinically is they will produce very much diffused action. Diffused action means wherever your cholinergic receptor are present at those areas, they will act and they will produce the action. Okay, like, and where exactly you will find the cholinergic receptors? Yes, near to the cholinergic neuron. Wherever cholinergic neurons are present, there should be a cholinergic receptor. Okay, like if here I have got pen, there should be a cap. That means wherever cholinergic neurons are there, there should be the receptor. Okay, so what all areas will you will find the cholinergic receptors? Like cholinergic receptors is present in your brain, because in brain so many cholinergic neurons are present, if you remember from my previous lecture. So as such, acetylcholine cannot cross the blood-brain barrier and it cannot move inside the brain. But any apart from acetylcholine, any cholinergic agonist which is lipophilic and can cross the blood-brain barrier, they can move to these neurons and will start producing some kind of action. Okay, and profound action may lead to production of convulsions. So as such, you can say the action of acetylcholine inside the brain lead to production of convulsions. Okay. Apart from next, where else you will find your cholinergic receptors? Yes, cholinergic receptors. If you remember, they are N receptor and N M receptor. Okay, we'll see about N receptor. What is the location of N receptor? Yes, these are present in your autonomic ganglion. Okay, so we have got two autonomic ganglion. One is for parasympathetic nervous system and another one is your sympathetic nervous system. Okay, parasympathetic nervous system, you will find autonomic ganglion over here, and here you will find your N receptor. Okay, so that means here the action of acetylcholine will be started and these parasympathetic nervous system can be initiated. Means whatever action you expect when parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, all those things you can see over here. Okay, so it causes activation of parasympathetic nervous system. But what about sympathetic nervous system? Even sympathetic nervous system will get activated. You know why? Because here also on the autonomic ganglion you will find N receptor. Okay, if you remember, in the parasympathetic nervous system, both pre as well as post ganglionic neuron contains acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter. But in case of sympathetic nervous system, the pre-ganglionic neuron contains acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter and post-ganglionic neuron contains norepinephrine as a neurotransmitter. Okay, so we'll see little bit about this. Like, see, even acetylcholine is able to activate the sympathetic nervous system. Means both parasympathetic as well as sympathetic nervous system gets activated when you give acetylcholine. The reason behind that is it causes activation of your N receptor, the autonomic ganglion present receptor. Okay, now suppose an instant we'll talk about how it causes activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Suppose you are giving acetylcholine along with atropine. Now what is atropine? Atropine is an agent that will cause muscarinic receptor blocker. Receptor blocker, or it blocks the muscarinic receptor. Means wherever you will find muscarinic receptor, suppose this is your heart. Okay, on the heart somewhere here you will find your M2 receptor. Okay, so normally acetylcholine will come, it will bind with the M2 receptor and it will produce action. But what atropine will do? Atropine will block this M2 receptor. So when it blocks the M2 receptor completely, whenever acetylcholine is coming here, it is unable to interact with the muscarinic receptor. Okay, so this is the receptor and it will be blocked. When it is be blocking, so acetylcholine is unable to come and interact with its receptor as such. Now whenever acetylcholine is given along with atropine, what will happen? First of all, it will act here. Acetylcholine will act on N receptor and it will activate this post ganglionic neuron and it will cause release of the norepinephrine. Okay, now as we are given atropine, atropine will block these receptors, so acetylcholine will not able to produce its action. Okay, so we have got one more system that is going on parallel to the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, that is your sympathetic nervous system. So we have got sympathetic nervous system neurotransmitter, that is norepinephrine. So norepinephrine will come and it will bind with its receptor present on the heart. Okay, see, on the heart the action of both sympathetic and parasympathetic system should be in level. Okay, so as such heart will go normal. In most of the cases parasympathetic will be most predominant, but as such we'll say for instance there should be some kind of balance, a normal balance between them. But since we have blocked the muscarinic receptor, the activity of parasympathetic nervous system will move down. Okay, and because of large amount of norepinephrine is being produced because of the activation of the autonomic ganglion of the sympathetic nervous system, the action of the sympathetic action will be increased because of increased norepinephrine. The action of parasympathetic nervous system will be decreased because of decrease in the acetylcholine. So the action of the sympathetic nervous system will predominate over here. Okay, so this is how acetylcholine will produce action or activation of the sympathetic nervous system also. Okay, so whenever it is given along with atropine, atropine will block all the muscarinic receptor, and because of that the action of acetylcholine will be reduced. But because of activation of this sympathetic postganglionic neuron, there will be release of norepinephrine, and because of this the action of the norepinephrine will be predominant over here. Okay, apart from this, where else will you find the receptor is your NN receptor, NM receptor, sorry. So suppose this is your autonomic ganglion and this one is your skeletal muscle along with your NM receptor. Now what happens when acetylcholine is released? It will come and it will bind with its receptor and it will cause influx of sodium ion, and there will be initiation of action potential, depolarization followed by repolarization, isn't it? But when you are giving acetylcholine in really huge amount, what will happen? There will be continuously depolarization. Okay, continuous depolarization will lead to failure of any kind of action potential. So as I have told you previously in my previous lecture that an M receptor is a kind of receptor that requires an optimum supply of acetylcholine, or you can say an optimum activation. If you are supplying acetylcholine in less amount, it will produce muscle weakness, and if you are giving or supplying acetylcholine in higher amount, then also muscle weakness will occur. Okay, so in both the cases there will be muscle weakness. So when you are providing acetylcholine in huge amount, it will produce continuous depolarization, and continuous depolarization will lead to inactivation of this sodium channel, so there won't be any action potential produced. Okay, so this is the action of the acetylcholine on an M receptor. Okay, so as such it was working normally, and you only pinched it by giving large amount of acetylcholine, thinking that if I'll be giving large amount of acetylcholine, the action of the skeletal muscle will be more, but instant the activity will be reduced because continuous depolarization will lead to inactivation of this sodium channel. So this sodium channel or this receptor requires an optimum supply of acetylcholine, nor less, neither more. Okay, apart from this we have got huge muscarinic receptor. Okay, like we have got muscarinic receptor M1, M2, M3, M4 and M5. So in all these areas you will see the actions of your acetylcholine. So if you remember, M1, M3 and M5 are kind of excitatory action, and M2 and M4 have got inhibitory action. The excitatory action is because the G protein coupled receptor is a kind of GQ, and M2 and M4 are producing inhibitory action because the G protein coupled receptor present over here is a kind of GI. Okay, apart from this, you people might be knowing the location of these receptors, like M1 receptor is present in your gastric glands, M2 receptor is present in your heart plus present pre-junctionally, M3 receptors is present in almost all the areas, like in your GI tract, smooth muscles of your GI tract, your respiratory system, your urinary system, and they are also present in almost all the glands, like your lacrimal glands, sweat glands, your salivary glands, and these M3 receptor are present in almost all the areas, whereas M4 and M5 are present in somewhere in your brain, so we need not to discuss the action over there, because we are discussing now the peripheral action. Okay, so we'll start our discussion with eyes. Okay, so we'll see what happens to the eyes when you are giving acetylcholine. Suppose this is your eyes, this is your eyeball, this one is your pupil. Okay, now you know iris will be there, and iris have got two important muscles. First one is your radial muzzle of iris, also known as dilator pupillae. Okay, I will write here with blue. I have got radial muzzle of iris, also known as the dilator pupillae. And iris have got one more muzzle, that is your circular muzzle. Okay, so we call it as circular muzzle of iris, also known as the sphincter pupillae. Okay, now see, what do you expect to happen over here? The size of the pupil should be reduced or increased. Okay, now you will get the answer. Suppose instead of parasympathetic we are discussing about sympathetic. Sympathetic nervous system is mainly related with our emotion in stressful condition. Okay, suppose anger is a kind of emotion, and whenever you are very much angry, what will happen to your eyeballs? The eyeballs will dilate, isn't it? The eyes dilates in sympathetic nervous system, and something opposite you expect in your parasympathetic nervous system. So what do we expect to the size of the pupil? It should dilate or it should reduce in size? Yes, it should reduce in size. So something opposite to that of sympathetic nervous system should occur. Okay, so whenever parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, or if you induce acetylcholine, it will produce a decrease in the size of pupil. Okay, so we have got a name for decrease in the size of pupil, that is meiosis. Okay, meiosis means decrease in pupil size. Okay, so whenever action of acetylcholine becomes predominant, it leads to decrease in the size of the pupil. This is known as meiosis. Okay, from next time onwards I'll start saying meiosis, and you should come to know that meiosis means there is a decrease in the size of the pupil. Now, among these two, which muscles are responsible for decreasing the size of the pupil? Okay, yes, it is your circular muscles. The circular muscles of the iris will produce meiosis. So the circular muscle of iris contains your muscarinic receptor. Now what kind of muscarinic receptor do you expect in your circular muscle of iris? Yes, it is producing contraction of the circular muscle, and contraction is a kind of excitatory reaction. So we have got three excitatory receptors, that is your M1, M1, M3 and M5. We leave M5. These are present in your CNS. So we have got two excitatory receptors, M1 and M3. Among M1 and M3, which receptor do you expect to present in your circular muscle of iris? Yes, it is your M3. Okay, so circular muscle of iris contains M3 receptor. Whenever parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, acetylcholine will come and it will bind with the M3 receptor. It will produce contraction of the circular muscle of iris or your sphincter pupillae, and it will start producing meiosis. Okay, so action of the acetylcholine on the eye is it produces meiosis. Apart from meiosis, we have got few more actions. So we'll see a lateral view of your eyeball and you will get to know. Suppose this is your outer coat of the eye that contains your cornea out of proportion. Okay, suppose this is your cornea. Next, here somewhere is your choroid body. Here is your ciliaris muscle, and here is your iris. Same, choroid body, ciliaris and iris. Okay, and the space between the iris is known as your pupil. Okay, so ultimately contraction and relaxation of the iris will will alter the size of your pupil. If the iris is moving towards one another, the size of the pupil will be reduced. Okay, suppose this is your iris. When iris are moving towards one another, the pupillar size will be reduced. When iris are moving away, means pupil size will be increasing. Okay, this is known as meiosis, and opposite of meiosis is your mydriasis. Okay, so ultimately over here in the iris you will be finding your circular muscle. Okay, so when circular muscle will get contracted, the iris will move towards one another, leading to production of your meiotic action. Okay, so here only you will find your circular muscle as well as your radial muscle. Okay, so when radial muscle will contract, it will move the iris up away from one another, leading to increase in the size of the pupil, which is known as mydriasis. Okay, now apart from this, this ciliaris muscle have got your one more muscarinic receptor. Okay, suppose this is your ciliaris muscle, and attached to the ciliaris muscle is a very important thing, that is your lens. This is suspensory ligament or zonular ligament, to which your lens will be suspended. Now even this ciliaris muscle have got muscarinic receptor, which is a kind of M3 receptor. Okay, over here also you will find M3 receptor over here. Okay, so M3 receptor are present on the ciliaris muscle also. Now what will happen when acetylcholine binds with the ciliaris muscle? Here M3 is there, and M3 is a kind of excitatory kind of receptor. That means it will produce contraction of your ciliaris muscle. So what happens when ciliaris muscle will contract? This ciliaris has got one end fixed and another end will be free. So this fixed end will be fixed, but this free end, because of contraction, it will move more downward and inward. Okay, suppose this is the point, and this point was like this, and because of contraction this point will become here like this. Okay, so contraction will move this ciliaris muscle more inward and downward. Okay, more inward and downward. Now attached to the ciliaris muscle will be your lens. So what will happen to the lens when this ciliaris muscle contracts? This suspensory ligament will become very loose. Because it is becoming very much loose, it is unable to stretch the lens. See, normally what happens here, when in a normal condition, when still the ciliaris muscle was not contracted, what was the situation of your lens? The lens was very much tight. Okay, suppose imagine your lens like a water filled bag which is attached to the rubber band, and we are like stretching it. Okay, so that time this lens will be stretched out very much flat, but because of contraction of the ciliaris muscle, this suspensory ligament will become very much loose. These rubber bands will become very much loose, and it is unable to stretch the lens, so the lens will become more thicker and globular. Okay, so this is the action of your acetylcholine on the lens and on the ciliaris muscle. Because of contraction of the ciliaris muscle, this ciliaris muscle will move more inward and downward. Okay, and because of this the suspensory ligament will become very much loose, and therefore the lens becomes more thicker and globular. Now what happens to the focusing feature of our eyes? See, for looking at a distant object we require a flat lens, and for looking at a very near object we require a globular lens. Okay, but here because of the acetylcholine the lens has become more globular. That means that person is unable to focus at a far object, only he can see the things which are present and near. Okay, so this is known as spasm of accommodation. Spasm of accommodation. That means the lens is fixed for near vision. Okay, so whenever acetylcholine is acting on our eyes, it mainly act at two areas. First one is your circular muscle of iris, or you say the sphincter pupillae, and the second area is your ciliaris muscle. Both contains M3 receptor. So when the sphincter pupillae gets contracted, it produces meiosis, and when ciliaris muscle contracts, it will cause the lens to becomes more globular and thicker. So these are the actions produced by the acetylcholine on your eyes. Both areas contains the same M3 receptor. Apart from this, here you will find very important gland, and the name of this gland is your lacrimal gland. So lacrimal glands are mainly responsible for secretion of your lacrimal fluid, that is your tears. So even lacrimal glands will contain same M3 receptor, which is a kind of excitatory kind of receptor, and when acetylcholine comes and bind with M3 receptor, it will lead to lacrimation. Okay. So similar to lacrimal glands, if we have started glands, we will just end up these glands. We have got few more glands, like we have got sweat glands on the skin. Inside our mouth we have got salivary gland. Okay, so even these glands contains your M3 receptor, which is a kind of excitatory receptor. So whenever acetylcholine comes and bind with M3 receptor of either sweat glands or salivary gland, it will activate it, and because of which large amount of sweating and salivation occurs. Okay, so basically these these acetylcholine will increase almost all the secretions. Okay, so we are discussed about three secretion: lacrimal secretion, salivary and sweat secretion. So whenever acetylcholine is increased in the level, it leads to lacrimation, sweating and salivation. So it will activate almost all the secretions. Next we will see the action of acetylcholine on heart. Now suppose this is your heart. Okay, two atrias above, two ventricles below. This is the right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle and left ventricle. On your right atrium you will have, what you will have, there will be your SA node, and over here will be your AV node, and next your bundle branches, Purkinje fibers and all those things. Now we have got two important branches of your vagus neurons. We have got right branch and we have got left. The right will supply to your SA node and the left will supply to your AV node. The right will also supply to few of the atrial muscles. Okay, so basically SA node, AV node and the atria will be receiving the vagal stimulation, or you can say they are receiving the acetylcholine because the cholinergic neurons are approaching them. But regarding ventricles are not receiving any kind of cholinergic neurons, so there is no action over here for acetylcholine as such. And over here you will find your cholinergic receptors as well. So which kind of cholinergic receptor do you expect on the heart? Yes, here we will find your M2 receptor. Okay, so on the heart M2 receptor are present. Now what will happen when M2 receptor will get activated? Yes, it is a kind of GI coupled protein, so there won't be any activation of adenylyl cyclase, but there will be activation of the potassium channel and there will be outflux of potassium ion and hyperpolarization takes place. Okay, that means no action potential is produced whenever M2 receptor will get activated. I believe you people know the entire mechanism. I have taught you in my previous lecture. Now what happens when SA node gets activated by acetylcholine? Since it is a kind of M2 receptor, so it will get inhibited. So what was the normal role of your SA node? SA node is responsible for generation and conduction of impulses. So what will happen over here? The generation and conduction of impulses will be there, but at a slower rate. Okay, so there will be decrease in the generation and conduction of nerve impulses, and to this we say it as a negative dromotrophic effect, action or effect. Okay, So there is a negative dromotropic action. Negative dromotropic action means there will be decrease in the generation and conduction of impulses. Okay, now when generation and conduction of impulses has been reduced, what will happen to your heart rate? The heart rate will be increase or decrease? It will be decrease, isn't it? To decrease in the heart rate. See, this is normally required. Okay, decrease in the heart rate, which is known as negative chronotropic action. See, decrease in the heart rate, we don't require an increase in heart rate, because we are discussing about the parasympathetic nervous system. See, parasympathetic nervous system is mainly concerned with resting condition. So why we require an increase in heart rate? Suppose any sympathetic situation, suppose any dog is behind you and you are running, so at that time your heart rate will go very seriously very high, isn't it? But we are discussing about parasympathetic nervous system, means something opposite to the sympathetic nervous system is being expected over here. So here there will be a decrease in the heart rate. When decrease in heart rate is there, there is a negative chronotropic action. So what will happen to the force of contraction? Yes, there will be decrease in the force of contraction as well. So this we call it as a negative inotropic actions. Okay, so as such, the action of acetylcholine on heart, you can say we have got a negative dromotropic action, negative chronotropic action, and negative inotropic action. These all are the actions of acetylcholine on the heart. If someone asks why these action means, because of the M2 receptor. Yes, one more important thing regarding the contraction, regarding the force of contraction. So the force of contraction is predominantly reduced in atria, but as such no reduced force of contraction you can see in your ventricle, because ventricle muscles do not get the cholinergic supply. Here you will not find any cholinergic receptor, but regarding the atrium, they contains the M2 muscarinic receptor, and they get the supply of the cholinergic neurons. Okay, apart from this, it was said that the action of the AV node, okay, what happens, it will produce cardiac arrhythmias are been precipitated by acetylcholine. It has been said that acetylcholine will increase the cardiac arrhythmias. Okay, so what was the reason behind that? Everyone was thinking. See, suppose this is your AV node. This is your AV node. So here is your muscarinic M2 receptor. Whenever acetylcholine comes and bind with the muscarinic M2 receptor, GI alpha will get activated and it will inhibit adenyl cyclase, plus the potassium channel will be opened over here and there will be loss of potassium ion. So the curve was expected somewhat like this. Okay, but it was theoretically, but practically, what happened? This thing was been reduced. Okay, this thing was reduced, and then your refractory period was been increased. This thing was been reduced. I hope you people know about these curves, the PR curve, PQR, the PR curve you people know. I think you people have studied about the ECG. So what was the action expected? The action expected was like this, but the action which came was like this, with an increased refractory period. Now everyone start thinking that why like this curve was been we were getting. Okay, this was theoretically we were expecting, but practically we got somewhat like this. The reason behind that was because of increased loss of the cation. There was some natural thing happening over here, because of which the sodium channel got open and there was influx of sodium ion. Because of the influx of the sodium ion, the contraction was been occurring before time. Because of the sodium ion, before time there will be depolarization produced, and then there was a long refractory period. So for this reason, the atrial flutter which was occurring previously, because of the acetylcholine, it will become more worsening to atrial fibrillation. Okay, So the heartbeat, which was nearly 200 to 250 beats per second, it will become more than 250 beats per second because of your acetylcholine. So acetylcholine will convert the atrial flutter into atrial fibrillation over here because of increase in the refractive period and a very fast depolarization occurring because of some unexpected opening of the sodium channel. So these all are the actions of acetylcholine on the heart. Okay, so on the heart, what kind of receptor of muscarinic do you expect? Yes, here you have got M2 receptor. Next, what kind of receptor is this M2? Is it a kind of excitatory or an inhibitory? Yes, it is a kind of inhibitory receptor. So where at what areas do you is this M2 receptor present? Yes, these are present in those areas which receive the cholinergic supply. That is, it is present in your SA node, it is present in your AV node, thus these are present in your atrial muscles, but no M2 receptor are present in your ventricle. Next, what all are the action? Yes, the action of the acetylcholine on the SA node is it produces a decrease in the generation and conduction of impulses, that is your negative dromotropic action. It will reduce the heart rate, that is your negative chronotropic action, plus it will reduce the force of contraction of the atria, that is the negative chronotropic effect. Apart from this, atrial flutter will be increased to atrial fibrillation because of the acetylcholine. Next, we'll study the actions of acetylcholine on your blood vessels. Okay, and so you might be knowing blood vessels are made up of endothelial cells. Okay, so these are your so many endothelial cells. Now even endothelial cells contains the same your friend M3 receptor. Now what happens when this M3 receptor will get activated? When this M3 receptor will get activated, it will produce activation of GQ receptor. And what will happening when this GQ protein coupler receptor will get activated? Yes, a series of reaction occurs, that is phosphatidyl inositol diphosphate was been converted into IP3 plus DAG, isn't it? And this IP3 will produce large amount of release of calcium ion, isn't it? Now this calcium ion binds with the colmodulin and it was activating an enzyme, that is calcium colmodulin kinase. Okay, if you people remember. Now this calcium colmodulin kinase will cause activation of a receptor, that is nitrous oxide synthase. Okay, so this calcium colmodulin kinase, this is an enzyme which causes phosphorylation and thereby activation of the enzyme, that is nitrous oxide synthase. Now this nitrous oxide synthase, what it will do, it will convert arginine into citrulline, plus there will be release of the nitrous oxide also. Okay, so these all things are happening in a endothelial cells. Okay, now what happens when nitrous oxide is being released? This nitrous oxide will go to its adjacent smooth muscle and it will produce dilation of the smooth muscle. Okay, so you can say there will be vasodilation. When these things are dilated, obviously the blood vessels also will produce dilation. Okay, so as such dilation is been produced, and because of this reason nitrous oxide is also known as endothelium derived relaxing factor. Endothelium derived means these are released or synthesized from the endothelial cells and it produces relaxation of the adjacent smooth muscle. Because of the relaxation of the adjacent smooth muscle, it will produce relaxation of the entire blood vessels. Relaxation is nothing but your vasodilation. So the action of acetylcholine on the blood vessel as such is it produces EDRF induced vasodilation. Now what happens when vasodilation is produced? What will happening to your blood pressure? Yes, there will be a fall in blood pressure. Okay, so as such whenever acetylcholine interacts with the M3 receptor present on the blood vessel, it will produce a fall in blood pressure. It will be producing vasodilation and thereby a fall in the blood pressure. Next we'll see the actions of acetylcholine on various smooth muscles. Smooth muscles. So we'll start our discussion with your bronchial smooth muscle. See, what do you expect the actions of acetylcholine on the bronchial smooth muscle? See, whenever sympathetic nervous system gets activated, you are running and you require more oxygen supply. So you will be breathing more. That time bronchodilation will occur. And over here in the parasympathetic nervous system, you are not running. So your oxygen demands are also not that much high, isn't it? So what do you expect? Whether bronchoconstriction should occur or bronchodilation should occur? Bronchoconstriction, isn't it? Because you require a lesser oxygen supply. So the action of acetylcholine on your bronchial smooth muscle is, here there will be bronchoconstriction and the presence of again the same M3 receptor. So M3 receptor produces bronchoconstriction. Apart from this, there is one more important thing, that is your bronchial secretion. See, in the case of sympathetic nervous system, whenever you are running and if there is you just require just oxygen, that's it. And after running, when you have stopped and you are sitting relaxed, at that time slowly the broncho secretion will be released. The cilia will be clearing of all the dirt whatever is present in your bronchial tract. So bronchial secretion mainly occurs in case of resting condition, means in case of parasympathetic nervous system. So on the lungs or in your respiratory system, you expect two actions to be produced by the M3 receptor. First one is it produces bronchoconstriction, plus there will be increased bronchial secretion, increased bronchial secretion. And therefore for these two reasons, parasympathetic you can say cholinergic agonistic agents should not be given in the patient with asthma or COPD, because it will worsen the condition. It will produce bronchoconstriction and there will be increased bronchial secretion. So there will be hindrance in the oxygen supply over there. Okay. So acetylcholine drug or any cholinergic agonistic agent should never be given to asthma patient or the patient suffering from COPD. Okay. So this was about your respiratory system. Next we'll see the another system of your smooth muscle, that is your gastrointestinal tract. Okay. So over here on the esophagus you have got M3 receptor. On the stomach you have got M3 receptor, and inside the stomach we have got some gastric glands where you will find M1 receptor. In the intestine, in the small intestine, the long intestine, everywhere you will find M3 receptor. Okay, I should start it from here only. The duodenum, then your large intestine and everything. Okay, everything contains M3 receptor. Over here there will be a sphincter, that is pyloric sphincter. They contains a combination of M3 and M2 receptor. Here M2 will be more predominant as such. So now what is the action? What action do you expect when you are in the resting condition? You need to digest your food, isn't it? So in sympathetic nervous system, there is no chance of digestion of food. When any dog, any lion, any monster is behind you, you will not think of digesting your food that time. But digestion occurs when you are resting condition. That means over here, whenever acetylcholine is released at the in the condition where parasympathetic nervous system is activated, at that time you will think of digesting your food. And for digestion, what you require large amount of gastric acid to be released. You expect that there will be increased motility of your tract, and next after digestion the elimination should also occur very peacefully. So for this reason M2 receptor are present over here. M2 receptor will increase the motility of your GI tract, plus M1 receptor which is present inside the gastric gland, it will cause the release of your gastric acid. Now these sphincters are there. Okay, we will talk about here about this pyloric sphincter. This pyloric sphincter have got predominant M2 receptor. Because of this sphincter will be relaxed, it will be present open. Okay, these are not contracted, these sphincters are opened and relaxed, because of which whatever content of your stomach is there, it can freely pass into your intestine. Okay, so this is your GIT. The action of acetylcholine in your gastrointestinal tract is it will increase the peristalsis and it will cause increase in the gastric acid secretion. So all these things that favors a good digestion of your food occurs. So these are the actions of acetylcholine on your GI tract. Next, coming to your last but not the least, your urinary tract. The urinary system contains the two important muscles, that is your detrusor muscle and the muscle of the trigone. Okay, so this detrusor muscle contains very important M3 receptor. Okay, so this detrusor muscles contracts, plus there is your lower urinary sphincter and the trigone muscles which undergoes relaxation, and there will be voiding of urine. So action of acetylcholine on your urinary system is it increases the bladder contraction and evacuation of your urinary content or urinary bladder content. So there will be increased urination, there will be increased defecation, all those actions are present. Okay, so these all are the actions of acetylcholine on your body. Okay, so a very quick recap of all the actions. We'll discuss more about the muscarinic action. The muscarinic action of acetylcholine on your eyes is it produces miosis, it will produce spasm of accommodation, it increases lacrimation, it increases sweat releasing, it increases salivation, it reduces the heart rate, force of contraction and generation and conduction of nerve impulses, plus it produces some kind of cardiac arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation will be produced. It will produce vasodilation, it will produce bronchoconstriction and increase bronchial secretion. It will increase the peristaltic movement of your GIT, leading to defecation, increase gastric acid secretion, it will increase urination. So all these things are the actions produced by acetylcholine on your body system. Now the time have came, we are actually discussing about the pharmacology of your parasympathomimetics, also known as the cholinergic drugs or cholinomimetics or cholinergic agonistic agents. So many names are given, but you should not get confused in them. So cholinergic agonistic agents or the parasympathomimetic drugs, these are the drugs which produces the actions similar to that of your acetylcholine. So now quickly coming to our classification, these agents are classified into two classes. The first class is directly acting drugs. Directly acting. And the second one will be, yes, obviously, indirectly acting. Okay. So what does it means by directly acting or indirectly acting means? See, we have got a cholinergic neuron. A cholinergic neuron that will release acetylcholine, and here will be your neuroeffector site where you will get all those receptor like nicotinic receptor or muscarinic receptor. So whatever acetylcholine is been released from these neurons, they will act on its receptor and it will produce action, isn't it? Apart from this, there will be, yes, what is this? There will be your acetylcholine esterases enzyme. What it will do, it will break the acetylcholine into acetate and choline, and there won't be any cholinergic action. Normally these things have been happening. Now directly acting agents means these are the drugs that will produce direct activation of this receptor, the cholinergic receptor. So they are known as directly acting drugs. So directly acting drugs will act just like acetylcholine. So most of the directly acting drugs will have got some kind of chemical similarities with that of the acetylcholine. So these agents are able to activate the cholinergic receptor and will start producing the actions of the cholinergic nervous system. Okay. So these are directly acting drugs. Directly acting drugs means they will directly activate the cholinergic receptors. Whereas in case of indirectly acting agents means these agents mainly act by inhibiting the enzymes acetylcholine esterases. What happens when acetylcholine esterases enzymes are being inhibited? The main role of acetylcholine is to inhibit the acetylcholine. Now when this enzyme is only inhibited, it is unable to inhibit the acetylcholine. So that means the availability of acetylcholine in the synapse will be increased. When it is more present in the synapse means it can easily activate the receptor. So these are indirectly acting agents, and this is the normal difference between direct and indirectly acting drugs. Directly acting cholinergic drugs will directly activate the receptor, whereas indirectly acting cholinergic drugs are those drugs that mainly act by inhibiting the enzyme acetylcholine esterases. Okay, so this is the major difference between the directly acting and indirectly acting drugs. Now these directly acting drugs are again have got two classes. The first class is choline esters, and the second class is alkaloids. Okay, now we'll quickly see the examples coming under choline esters. The first examples under choline ester is, you know it, your lovely friend acetylcholine. Apart from acetylcholine, we have got some chemical analogs, or any some drugs which have got chemical similarity with that of acetylcholine. Those are methacholine. Just one methylation on the acetylcholine will produce methacholine. Next we have got carbachol and bethanicol. Okay, so these are the examples of your cholinergic esters. Next, coming to the alkaloids, we have got muscarine and we have got pilocarpine. Okay, so these two are the example of your alkaloids. See, one thing I want to make it clear that whatever cholinergic agonistic agents we are talking about, its action is mainly occurring at the muscarinic receptor. Okay, because the parasympathetic neuroeffector junction contains only muscarinic receptor. You will not discuss here about the nicotinic receptor, because nicotinic receptor we have got one type, that is NN type, present in the autonomic ganglion, and the another type, that is NM, is present in your skeletal muscle. That will not come under this parasympathetic neuroeffector junction, that is the autonomic ganglionic junction or your skeletal muscle end plate. Okay, so the parasympathetic neuroeffector junction mainly contains the muscarinic receptor. So in the parasympathetic mimetic actions, will mainly discuss the actions which are coming at the muscarinic receptor only. Here we are not dealing with the nicotinic receptors, any N or NM type. Okay, next, coming to the indirectly acting agents. Indirectly acting agents are again of two types. First one is the agents, means normally what is the action of the indirectly acting agents? These agents mainly act by inhibiting the enzyme acetylcholine esterases. So there are few drugs that will inhibit the enzyme reversibly, and there are few drugs which will inhibit the enzymes irreversibly. So depending upon that, we have got reversible inhibitors, and the examples of irreversible inhibitors are your physostigmine, neostigmine, pyridostigmine, edrophonium, tacrine, rivastigmine, donepezil, and lastly galantamine. Okay, so these are the examples of reversible inhibitors. Next we will see about the irreversible inhibitors. The examples for irreversible inhibitors are, first of all, diflos. Next we have got ecothiopate, parathion, malathion, Next we have got some nerve gases. This parathion and malathion are insecticides. We have got examples of nerve gases as well, like your tabun, sarin and soman. These are nerve gases. What are these nerve gases? We'll come to know. Okay, so this is the classification of parasympathomimetics. Parasympathomimetics have got two broad classes: directly acting and indirectly acting. Directly acting means these agents can directly activate the receptors, that is your muscarinic receptor, whereas indirectly acting agents, these are the drugs which will inhibit the enzyme acetylcholine esterases, and thereby it indirectly increases the availability of acetylcholine in the synapse, and thereby the actions of the acetylcholine are being produced. Okay, now we'll see the actions of these all drugs one by one. So our discuss will be starting with your directly acting agents. We have already discussed about acetylcholine. Next we'll discuss about the methacholine, carbachol and bethanechol. So we'll start our discussion with methacholine. First of all, we'll look at its chemical structure, which is almost similar to that of acetylcholine. Okay, everything is same. Here you will find acetate group, oh, and a choline group. But here the difference will be a methylation. The choline will be methylated in your methacholine, and that makes methacholine a somewhat specific or selective in action. Any cholinergic agonistic drug which have got methylation on the choline group, it will become more selective for muscarinic receptor. Means in any of the cholinergic agonistic drug, if there is methylation over here, means they will not produce any action on the nicotinic receptor. They will produce action only and only on your muscarinic receptor. So this is your methacholine. But when we want to see about the actions of methacholine, see, as such, methacholine is no more used systemically, and the reason behind that is again because it's diffused action, plus because it gets rapidly inhibited by your choline esterase enzyme. Because of short half-life, methacholine is no more used systemically, but the only single use of methacholine is it is used for the diagnosis of asthma. It is used for diagnosing that whether asthma is present or not. So what we'll do, we'll give a small dose of methacholine, and because of that small dose, the bronchial tree will get very much irritated. Okay, because of very small, very minute dose of methacholine will produce large irritation of the bronchial tree, and there will be increased bronchial secretion, and the situation will be worsening. So when this thing happens, that means the person have got asthma. So methacholine is basically used just for diagnosis of asthma, whether asthma is there or not. Just for diagnosis we can use methacholine as such, but we are not using methacholine for any clinical or any significant use or any systemic action of methacholine. Next we'll go to our second drug, that is your bethanechol. Okay, very quickly we'll see the structure of bethanechol. In bethanechol there is some difference. In bethanechol, this carbamate, this acetate group, this acetate group is been replaced by carbamate group. Carbamate is nothing but your CH3 is been replaced by NH2. That's it. It will become carbamate. Okay, NH2 C double bond O. This is carbamate. CH3 C double bond O was acetate. This is carbamate, and the rest of the structure is same. Here also there is methylation of the choline, and rest everything is quite same. Okay, this is bethanechol. Okay. Now the importance of botanical over acetylcholine and methacholine is, the first thing is it has got methylation on the choline that makes botanical more selective as compared to acetylcholine. That means we can see the action of acetylcholine only on the muscarinic receptor. It does not produce any nicotinic action. Okay. So any cholinergic agonist that has got methylation on the choline part, they will become more selective action for muscarinic receptor. Plus, in addition to that, here the acetate is being replaced by carbamate. So because of this carbamate, it is getting protected from your enzyme acetylcholine esterases. That means botanical have got a longer half life as compared to acetylcholine and methacholine. Okay, so these are the two important or two advantages of botanical over acetylcholine. The first advantage is selective action. See, whenever we are giving any drug, we require more selective action. We require the drug should go only and only to the target spot and produce action. We don't require any diffused action. So botanical is producing more selective action as compared to acetylcholine. Because of this methylation, it is producing only and only muscarinic action, and there is no nicotinic action. Okay, when there is no nicotinic action, there is no question of activation of the autonomic ganglion or activation of the sympathetic nervous system as such. Okay, so botanical have got methylation, because of which it is having action on the muscarinic receptor, plus because of the carbamate is acetate is replaced by carbamate, it is protected from the choline esterase enzyme, and therefore botanical have got a longer half life as compared to acetylcholine. So these all are the important properties of botanical over acetylcholine. Next, coming to the action, the two important actions produced by botanical is on your bowels and bladders and bladder. Very easy to remember. B for botanical, B for bowel, and B for bladder. Okay. So these agents are mainly used in case of atonic bladder. Atonic bladder means when the tonicity of the bladder has been reduced. So these agents will mainly cause activation of the M3 receptor of the bladder, and there will be contraction of the detrusor, and there will be elimination of your urine. So in case of atonic bladder, and when does atonic bladder kind of problem is produced, it is mainly produced post operatively. Even postpartum, there will be problem in the abdominal there will be problem in your bladder. The bladder tonicity will be reduced after operation or after a childbirth. The tonicity of the bladder will be reduced, and there will be too much urine accumulated inside the bladder, and there will be very much problematic condition. There will be abdominal pain as such. So for reducing that, for increasing the tonicity of the bladder, we can give botanical. Similarly, we have got atonic stomach problem. Atonic stomach, okay, which may occur because which may lead to your gastroparalysis. Means your peristaltic movement of your GI tract will be reduced over here. So in these cases also you can give botanical to increase the motility of your GI tract. Okay, so botanical will actually activate the bowels and bladders as such. So the main actions of botanical is on your gastrointestinal tract and your urinary system. Okay, so they are mainly used for treating atonic bladder and atonic stomach. Okay, they have got large amount of uses. Like when you see about use, they are mainly used in chronic hypotonic neurological atonic bladders. Okay, so whatever might be the reason behind the atonic bladder, this botanical can treat this atonic bladder. It can increase the tonicity of the bladder in any of these cases. Apart from this, the atonic stomach may occur because of there are many reasons, like there will be atonic megacolon, atonic megacolon. What really happens in a atonic megacolon? Suppose this is your large intestine. Okay, And suppose over here there is some loss of some tonicity. Okay, here there is loss of tonicity. You know why there is loss of tonicity? See, up to transverse colon, this large intestine was barely supplied from your cranial part, the 10th cranial nerve, and after the transverse colon, the large intestine was being supplied from your sacral nerve, if you remember. So there, from the cranial nerve to sacral nerve, there is an area, and unfortunately sometimes what happens, these area are not getting any autonomic supply, because of which their tonicity will be reduced. Okay, and when the tonicity of this area is been reduced, whatever food is there, it is unable to move forward, and all the food will get accumulated over here, and the size of your colon over this area will be increased. It will become mega. That's why we call it as a mega colon. And this mega colon occurs because of reduced tonicity of some part of your colon. That's why the name is given atonic megacolon. So this atonic megacolon problem can also be solved by your Bethany call. Okay, and after this post-operative dynamic alias, all these problems can be solved by your Bethany call. Next, after coming to the actions, we will see about the side effects. The side effects of your Bethany call is the generalized cholinergic stimulative side effects. Like when you are giving Bethany call, it will activating, apart from activating the bowels and bladders, it will activate all other areas where muscarinic receptor are present. Like it may lead to your salivation, lacrimation, sweating, bronchoconstriction, defecation. Okay, so all these things are being increased by your muscarinic receptor. There will be cardiac means there will be reduced heart rate, there will be meiosis. Because of dilation of the blood vessels, there will be fall in blood pressure. Okay, so all these things are the side effects of Bethany-call. So side effects are nothing but the generalized action of your cholinergic stimulation will occur as a kind of side effect. Next, if you want to know about the contraindications of Bethany-call, is Bethany-call are contraindicated in peptic ulcer. You know why? Because we have got M1 receptor present in our gastric gland, and Bethany-call produces a generalized activation of the muscarinic receptor. So there will be increased gastric acid released because of M1 activation, and it will worsen the peptic ulcer. So Bethany-call should never be given to any patient suffering from peptic ulcer. It should never be given to asthma patient or patient suffering from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, that is COPD, because it produces bronchoconstriction and increased bronchial secretion. Bethany-call should never be given to patients who are suffering from any ischemic heart disease or atherosclerosis, because there will be a further drop in the ischemic area of the blood flow. Okay, so these all are the contraindications where Bethany-call should never be given. But as such, always you should remember B for Bethany-call, B for bowels, B for bladder. So Bethany-call is always used for the activation of the bowels and bladders whenever they are inactivated. Inactivated means when there is atonicity of the bladder and bowel. At that time we can give Bethany-call for increasing the tonicity of the both. Okay. Now coming to our next drug, that is your Carbachol. Okay, quickly we will see about its structure and you will know the actions. Here also in Carbachol also the acetate is been replaced by carbamate, so that means it have got a longer half life. But in the choline part there is no methylation. Okay, since there is no methylation in the choline part, that means these Carbachol are not selective. These are non-selective kind of cholinergic agonist. Non-selective means they can produce action on both nicotinic receptor as well as on your muscarinic receptor, and which is not desirable. That means means it is not commonly used systemically because it can stimulate the generalized ganglionic stimulation. Means apart from parasympathetic, it will also cause stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system also. So because of this, there will be a strong stimulation followed by depression. Means on the cardiovascular system, it will produce a strong stimulation then followed by a very quick depression. On this GI tract, it will be strong stimulation and then followed by a strong depression. So for this reason, carbachol is no more used as such. We have got very small use that it there may be some chances that it can be used in case of glaucoma, a very small use for reducing the intraocular pressure. That's it, and they are not used anywhere else. In glaucoma also, they are very rarely used drugs, carbachol. Okay, because of its generalized action, because of activation of your nicotinic receptor also. When nicotinic receptor are activated, then that means it can activate both parasympathetic as well as sympathetic action. Okay, so which is not desirable as such. So that's why carbachol is no more used as such clinically. Next we'll see about a very important drug, that is your pilocarpine. It is an alkaloid, okay, that is directly acting. Now about pilocarpine is, these are the tertiary amines and they are stable with acetylcholine esterases also. So when we see the structure of pilocarpine, it will be something like this, a bit complicated. Okay, so this is your pilocarpine. So the advantage of pilocarpine is, where should the acetylcholine esterase interact? Okay, there is no interaction, there is no attack of acetylcholine esterase on the pilocarpine. That makes the pilocarpine really long acting agent. Okay, and apart from this, it is a kind of tertiary amine. Okay, tertiary amine means you will not find any quaternary amine. Quaternary amine contains this charges. Here there is no charges present over here. So because of this, it makes it really lipophilic. It is more lipophilic as compared to acetylcholine. Okay, so we have got two important advantages of pilocarpine over acetylcholine. The first advantage is, because acetylcholine esterase cannot interact and inhibit the pilocarpine, that makes it of a bigger half life. Plus there is tertiary amine, there is no charges on the nitrogen atoms, that makes it more lipophilic in nature. Now what all are the actions produced by pilocarpine? Pilocarpine is mainly used for the patients suffering from glaucoma. Okay, so it is used for reducing the intraocular pressure. See, we will study glaucoma in detail in our next. Apart from this, pilocarpine is also used for the treatment of xerostomia. Xerostomia means it is a condition where there is dry mouth. Now why do dry mouth occurs? See, for keeping our mouth moist and wet, we require salivary glands. But you know, when there is some situation like any person suffering from head and neck cancer, those person will be receiving irradiation at the head and neck area. But sometimes, you know, sometimes the radiation will fall on the salivary gland also, which because of which the salivary glands will be destroyed. And when salivary glands are destroyed, there won't be any release of saliva from inside the mouth. Okay, so this is a situation that occurs in xerostomia. So how pilocarpine will help? What pilocarpine will do, whatever residual salivary glands are present, they will start activating those salivary gland, and from those residual salivary gland only some saliva will be released, and thereby the mouth will be maintained a bit moist. Apart from this, it is used in the treatment of Sjogren's syndrome. Sjogren's syndrome is a kind of autoimmune problem or autoimmune disease where antibodies are produced against your eyes, not eyes, your lacrimal gland and salivary gland. When lacrimal gland and salivary glands are been destroyed, what will happen? It will produce a condition where there will be dry eyes and dry mouth. This situation is known as Sjogren's syndrome. So pilocarpine will activate the residual salivary gland as well as the lacrimal gland and will help to maintain the moist or wetness of the eyes and mouth. Okay, so this is about pilocarpine, and I believe we have completed the directly acting cholinergic agonistic agents. Now we will quickly jump to the indirectly acting drugs.